The private terminal shimmered with luxury. Gold-edged marble floors stretched out beneath soft amber lights, and the faint scent of polished leather and espresso filled the air. It was a place built to remind everyone who belonged and who didn't. At the check-in counter, a young attendant in a crisp white uniform straightened her blazer. Her smile was sharp, not kind. The kind of smile that said, "I know my place and I'll make sure you remember yours." Then the door opened. A tall black man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped inside. His presence filled the room, calm, controlled, quietly powerful. A hand-stitched leather briefcase swung from his fingers. Every move spoke of quiet success, but the attendant's expression changed the moment her eyes met his. "Sir," she said, her tone honeyed but firm, "this area is for our private jet members only." The sentence landed like a slap. Conversations paused. Glasses froze mid-air. A few people looked up, half smiling, waiting to see what would happen next. The man said nothing. He simply placed a platinum-colored card on the counter. The metal caught the light, heavy, understated, undeniable. The attendant didn't even look at it. "I'll need to see identification and proof of membership," she added. Her voice carried further this time, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "We've had incidents before." That pause after incidents said everything she didn't. From a velvet sofa, a middle-aged woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. "Security should handle this quickly," she whispered, not softly enough. Two men nearby chuckled into their whiskey glasses. A mother pulled her child closer. The air thickened with judgment, and through it all the man stood perfectly still, silent, composed, as if he'd seen this scene play out too many times before. His fingers tapped once on the counter. Just once. "Perhaps," he said evenly, "you should check your system again." The attendant crossed her arms. "Please don't make this difficult." A security guard appeared, tall and broad, the kind of man trained to end problems before they began. His badge read Andrews. "Is there an issue here?" he asked. The attendant gestured toward the man. "This gentleman is refusing to provide documentation." The guard's gaze hardened. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." The man nodded slowly. "Then call your regional director." That simple sentence sliced through the room. People exchanged glances. Who even knew the name of a regional director, let alone demanded to speak with one? The attendant's smile faltered. "That won't be necessary." But the man spoke again, softly this time. "Tell Ethan Reynolds that Daniel Cole is here." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. The guard blinked. The attendant's fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "You know the director personally?" Daniel's expression didn't change. "Better than that," he said. "He works for me." The room went still, but the attendant forced a laugh. "You're welcome to believe that, sir, but this is a restricted area." The security guard stepped closer. "Let's make this easy. Please come with me." Daniel didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a phone unlike any they'd seen before. Matte black, engraved with a silver symbol of two wings intertwined in infinity. He pressed a single button. Every screen in the lounge flickered. The flight board froze. A moment later, heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Ethan Reynolds, the regional director himself, appeared, flanked by two executives. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier, and his confidence radiated authority. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The attendant straightened immediately. This man was attempting to access the lounge without authorization. Ethan turned to Daniel, already wearing the kind of polite disdain that never quite reached his eyes. "Sir, this is a private area for members of the Skylux Aviation Network. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "You don't recognize me, Ethan." The director frowned. "Should I?" Daniel smiled faintly. "You should. Because I own it," the room gasped. Phones rose again. The moment was about to go viral, but Ethan laughed, whined a short, brittle sound. "I think you're mistaken." Daniel's calm never wavered. "Am I?" He pressed another button on his phone. Every display in the lounge changed again, this time revealing a crisp logo, Skylux Holdings International, and beneath it, in bold white letters, Chief Executive Officer, Daniel A. Cole. Silence swallowed the room whole. The silence stretched until it felt alive. Every person in that gleaming lounge seemed frozen between disbelief and dread. The security guard's hand, once gripping his radio, dropped slowly to his side. The attendant's face turned pale, her lips parted in shock. Daniel Cole didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His authority filled every inch of that room. "I built this company," he said, his tone steady as steel. "Every aircraft that takes off under the Skylux name, every lounge like this one, every card you refuse to check belongs to me." Ethan's jaw tightened. His confident posture began to crumble under the weight of recognition. That's not possible," he stammered. Daniel took a slow step forward. The room seemed to shrink around him. "Do you know what's possible, Ethan? Change, accountability, consequences." The flight board above them still glowed with static light. "Flight 309 to Zurich, delayed." But nobody noticed anymore. Madeline, the attendant, clutched the counter as though it could save her. "Sir, I didn't know," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, not with anger, but with disappointment that cut even deeper. "You didn't care to know," he said quietly. "That's the difference." He turned back to Ethan. "Tell me, how well do you know your company's organizational chart?" Ethan blinked. "What are you talking about?" Daniel lifted the phone again. "Let me refresh your memory." One by one, the screens throughout the lounge began displaying names. Vice presidents, regional managers, directors, all connected by digital lines that led upward, converging into a single name at the top. Daniel Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Skylux Holdings International. The murmurs started. Someone whispered, "He's the owner." Another said, "Oh my God, this is real." Ethan tried to recover his composure. "Mr. Cole, there's been a misunderstanding." Daniel cut him off with quiet precision. "There's been a pattern, and I'm done watching it repeat." He glanced around the room. "You see, I didn't come here by accident. I've been monitoring reports from lounges across the network. Same story, different faces. People denied access. People judged by appearance before a single word was spoken." He took another step closer to the counter. "Today I decided to see it for myself." The weight of his words sank in like a stone in still water. The passengers who'd been filming now lowered their phones. Their amusement had curdled into guilt. Ethan tried one last time to reclaim the narrative. "With all due respect, sir, these are isolated incidents. We handle complaints according to procedure." Daniel's voice sharpened just slightly. "Procedure?" He turned his screen toward the crowd. "Let's review your procedures." The displays changed again, revealing graphs, reports, complaint statistics. "Over 800 documented discrimination reports in the last 18 months, Daniel said. "Your region accounts for 20% of them. You've paid out nearly $3 million in settlements. $3 million for the privilege of looking the other way." Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan's composure cracked completely. His shoulders sagged under the numbers that glared down at him. Daniel's voice softened. "I don't believe in revenge, Ethan, but I do believe in responsibility." The guard Andrews stood motionless near the entrance. His earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by a quiet shame. "You," Daniel said, turning to him. "You've worked here long?" 15 years, sir." "Ever seen something like this before?" Andrews hesitated. "Yes, sir. More than once." "Did you ever stop it?" The guard lowered his eyes. "No, sir," Daniel nodded slowly. "You will now." Then he faced the entire room. "Every screen in this building has been recording. Every interaction, every word, every expression. It's all documented. And from this moment forward, Skylux will operate under new rules." The room went dead silent again. No more guessing who belongs. No more judgment by appearance. Every customer interaction will be verified through technology, not prejudice. Every employee will complete intensive bias and ethics training. Every report of discrimination will go directly to me. Ethan swallowed hard. "You can't implement that overnight." Daniel's tone didn't change. "I already have." The lounge doors opened and a group of corporate staff entered carrying tablets and legal folders. Their presence was quiet but final. Daniel turned to Ethan. "You have two choices. Resign immediately with severance and assigned non-disclosure, or be terminated for cause. And the footage we've gathered will be submitted to the board." Ethan's mouth went dry. "You wouldn't?" "I would," Daniel said, "because integrity matters more than comfort." The crowd didn't breathe. Everyone was witnessing something they'd never forget. Ethan's signature trembled across the screen of a company tablet. 23 years with the firm, erased in the space of one line. Daniel looked at him one last time. Power isn't about control, Ethan, it's about responsibility. Remember that. Then he turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping across the faces that had once looked at him with suspicion. Every one of you just became part of a change that starts today. The murmurs began again, but this time they carried a different tone. Awe, realization, shame. Daniel pocketed his phone. Now, he said, let's finish what we started. He motioned for the staff to follow him toward the glass-walled conference suite at the back of the lounge. The employees obeyed without hesitation. The guard stood aside, opening the door for the man he had nearly removed. As Daniel stepped inside, the entire lounge exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for minutes. Behind him, the digital screen still glowed with his name, a reminder of what real authority looks like. Not loud, not cruel, but certain. Inside the conference room, the reckoning was just beginning. The glass doors closed behind them, sealing the sound of murmurs on the other side. Inside the executive suite, the atmosphere was different, colder, sharper. The room was designed to impress powerful people, but now it felt like a courtroom. Daniel took the seat at the head of the mahogany table. His movements were measured, deliberate. Across from him, Ethan hesitated before sitting down, his composure unraveling by the second. The others, Madeline, Andrews, and two corporate administrators, stood in uneasy silence. Daniel opened his tablet. The massive screen on the wall came to life, projecting lines of data, contracts, and performance charts. Let's talk about numbers, he began calmly. Because numbers never lie. People do. Ethan swallowed hard. The screen showed a map dotted with red markers. Each of these represents a verified discrimination complaint filed under your regional management. Daniel continued. 247 in total. Do you see the pattern? Ethan's voice trembled. Sir, some of those cases were exaggerated. Daniel raised a hand. Don't insult my intelligence. Every one of these red dots is a person. A paying customer who walked into a Skylux lounge expecting dignity and walked out humiliated. The words hit like hammer blows. The air itself seemed heavier. Daniel swiped again, and now came the financial charts. Stock performance, quarterly losses, settlements. You've cost this company nearly $3 million in payouts and far more in public trust. All because you couldn't recognize bias when it stared you in the face. Madeline's hands shook. She looked at the screen as if it were a mirror showing her worst self. Daniel turned to her. Do you remember what you said to me? He asked softly, her eyes filled with tears. Yes, sir, I said you didn't belong here. He nodded slowly. And why did you say that? She hesitated. Because you assumed, he repeated. That's where it always begins. One assumption, one unchecked thought, one moment where you decide someone's worth before you know their name. Andrews shifted his weight, his voice low. Sir, I've been security here a long time. I've seen things I shouldn't have ignored. I'm sorry. Daniel's expression softened slightly. I know, and I believe you can help fix what others broke. That's why you're still standing here. The large screen changed again. This time it displayed employment clauses, each section highlighted in red. Daniel read them aloud. Section 15.7. Gross misconduct resulting in discriminatory behavior. Section 22.3. Behavior damaging to corporate reputation. Section 31.1. Termination for cause forfeiture of benefits. Ethan's face drained of color. Sir, I understand your frustration, but this isn't frustration, Daniel interrupted. This is accountability. You don't just lose a job today, Ethan. You lose the privilege of power you abused. He looked up from the tablet. Do you know what this company stands for? Ethan didn't answer. Daniel did. It stands for access. For mobility. For the idea that success should open doors, not close them. But under your management, those doors have been guarded by prejudice. He stood, walking toward the window. Outside, private jets gleamed under the afternoon light. Every one of those aircraft represents freedom. But what good is freedom if we chain others with judgment? The silence stretched again. Daniel turned back to them. Starting today, things change. Every lounge employee, every security officer, every manager will complete mandatory bias training. Every customer interaction will be verified through our system. No more relying on appearance to decide worth. He gestured toward Andrews. You'll lead our new security protocol. I want you to teach others how to diffuse situations before they escalate. No more intimidation, just protection. Andrews nodded, his voice steady. I'll make it happen, sir. Then Daniel faced Madeline. You have two options. Resign quietly or stay and rebuild what you damaged. But if you stay, you start at the bottom. 40 hours of training, 6 months of probation. And every apology you owe, you'll write personally. Her answer came through tears. I want to stay. I want to do better. Good, he said. Change begins when you stop defending who you were. He turned to the administrators. Effective immediately, implement system-wide reform. Real-time verification devices for all staff. AI monitoring for bias indicators. Anonymous customer feedback channels. Quarterly audits. Zero tolerance for discrimination. This will not be another headline scandal. It will be a new standard. One of the administrators spoke timidly. Sir, implementing that company-wide will take months. Daniel gave a small, knowing smile. Then we'd better start today. He turned his tablet around again. The stock graph appeared, Skylux's value rising and falling like a heartbeat. We went public at $470 per share. Do you know what it could have been without these scandals? $890. That's over $2 billion in lost market value, all because leaders like you forgot that respect isn't optional. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. What happens to me now? You're done, Daniel said, but maybe not finished. Learn from this. Understand what happens when you let bias become policy. You built walls in a place meant for flight. Ethan's resignation letter appeared on the screen, already prepared. He signed it with a shaking hand. His name looked small on the glowing page. Daniel didn't gloat. He simply nodded to an aide. Escort Mr. Reynolds to collect his things. The door opened. The director who had ruled his region for decades walked out, head bowed, surrounded by silence. Daniel stood alone at the head of the table. For a moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, more to the room than to anyone specific. This isn't just about one man losing his job. It's about every system that allowed it to happen. We're not punishing one mistake. We're rebuilding an entire culture. The administrators exchanged glances. They understood what this meant: work, reform, exposure, but also a chance to be part of something bigger. Daniel looked at Madeline again. You'll help lead customer relations after your training. I want people to see that growth is possible. Redemption means more than reputation. She nodded through her tears. Thank you for giving me that chance. Daniel looked at her kindly. Just earn it. He closed the tablet, ending the session. The screens dimmed, leaving only the reflection of the tarmac and the silent aircraft waiting outside. The company had just changed forever. But the world outside didn't know it yet. That was about to change. The transformation began before dawn. Within hours of the meeting, quiet ripples turned into waves that rolled through every corner of Skylux Aviation. Emails flooded the inboxes of managers around the world, announcing a new chapter in company policy. Overnight, the rules changed, and with them, the culture that had once protected arrogance behind polished marble walls. Technicians arrived at the lounges with new devices, sleek handheld systems connected to Skylux's global verification network. No more guessing, no more judging, no more asking people to prove who they were while others walked through unquestioned. Every customer now had a digital identity recognized instantly. Every employee had to scan, not assume. Daniel watched it unfold from his office window overlooking the runway. Rows of private jets gleamed in the sunlight like silver arrows waiting for command. For him, it wasn't just business, it was legacy. News spread quickly. Customers shared their stories online, some embarrassed by what they had witnessed, others in awe of how swiftly justice moved. The same passengers who once watched a man humiliated were now forced to see the replay of their own silence. The videos recorded during that day's confrontation surfaced across social media, but not as anyone expected. What began as gossip turned into a lesson. The world saw not a CEO seeking vengeance, but a leader redefining accountability. Articles appeared overnight. The CEO who grounded discrimination. When the owner walked among the customers, how integrity rebuilt an empire. At first, people doubted it. Then they saw the results. Customer complaints dropped almost instantly. Within 2 weeks, incident reports decreased by more than half. Guests who once entered lounges bracing for judgment now walked into genuine greetings and respectful service. Employees who used to fear making mistakes found purpose in something higher than protocol. They found pride. Madeleine, who once stood behind a counter and humiliated the wrong man, now stood in front of new recruits as a trainee mentor. Her voice trembled the first time she spoke to them. "I'm not proud of my past," she admitted, "but I'm proof that people can change when they choose to learn." She stayed late every night, reviewing policies, rewriting scripts, making sure no one ever repeated her error. Andrews, the head of security, took charge of retraining teams across the country. His sessions didn't begin with rules. They began with stories. "You don't protect people by standing over them," he told his trainees. "You protect them by standing beside them." His words carried weight because they came from a man who had learned it the hard way. Daniel made sure every story like theirs was recorded and shared across internal networks. The company began to celebrate growth instead of seniority, empathy instead of intimidation. A month later, the numbers spoke louder than any memo could. Complaints dropped by 67%. Customer satisfaction soared. Employees stayed longer, performed better, smiled more often. Stock prices started climbing steadily, investors calling it the kindness dividend. But the change didn't stop at Skylux. Rival companies noticed. One by one, they began adopting similar systems. Bias training became a requirement, not a formality. Verification devices spread across terminals in London, Dubai, Singapore, and New York. Industry leaders called it the coal standard. For Daniel, it wasn't about competition, it was about culture. He knew systems could evolve, but real progress required hearts to change. Then came the courtroom moment he'd been waiting for. Months after the lounge incident, a judge reviewed the custody dispute that had once haunted his family. Ethan Reynolds' discriminatory record, now public, became a matter of legal evidence. His arrogance, once cloaked in authority, now lay bare in documented proof. The judge's ruling was decisive. Daniel's stepdaughter would remain with her mother, safe, loved, and free from the man who had tried to tear their family apart. The same man who had dismissed Daniel as undesirable influence was now forced to confront his own prejudice under the bright light of truth. Justice had come quietly, without anger or spectacle, just the slow, relentless power of evidence. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't even speak to Ethan afterward. There was nothing left to say. The system had spoken for him. Back at headquarters, Daniel's reforms deepened. Every employee, from the janitors who cleaned the hangars to the executives who signed contracts, now underwent the same training, learned the same language of respect, and signed the same pledge. Posters appeared in every lounge. Dignity is not optional. Respect is not negotiable. Even passengers began to change. They started holding each other accountable, calling out prejudice where it appeared. The same people who once stood by now stepped forward. The world outside saw Skylux not just as a luxury brand, but as a model of what fairness and power could look like. Business schools wrote case studies. Journalists called it a revolution in corporate culture. And through it all, Daniel remained calm, steady, and focused. He didn't chase attention. He let the results speak. One evening, as he reviewed new performance reports, a message popped onto his screen. It was from Madeleine. "Sir, I just wanted you to know. Today a customer told me it was the first time she felt truly welcome in one of our lounges. She said she'd avoided them for years because of how people looked at her. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of something better." Daniel smiled faintly. That single message meant more than any chart or headline. He knew then that this wasn't just a company reborn, it was a culture finally waking up. And yet, he also knew change couldn't stop there. The next step was waiting, larger than any boardroom reform, because the movement he'd started inside one lounge was about to reshape an entire industry. 6 months later, the world looked different. Airports glowed with the same sterile light as before, but something in the air had shifted, an unseen current of awareness, a quiet sense of equality that had been earned, not granted. Skylux Aviation had become more than a company. It was a symbol. What began as a single confrontation in a private jet lounge had turned into a global movement, reshaping how luxury, service, and humanity coexisted. Competitors who once scoffed at Daniel's policies now copied them openly, disguising imitation as innovation. But everyone knew where it started. The change had spread faster than anyone predicted. Within months, Every Skylux facility operated under the new system. AI monitoring software flagged bias before it became behavior. Staff feedback channels ran directly to corporate headquarters. For the first time, customers trusted a brand not because of prestige but because of principle. News outlets called it the coal revolution. Business magazines analyzed it as a moral economy in motion. But Daniel didn't care for labels. He cared about results. He walked through the newly renovated Skylux executive terminal one bright morning. The same space that had once hummed with quiet prejudice now felt alive with warmth and purpose. The marble still shone, but now it reflected something deeper than wealth. It reflected conscience. Behind the counter stood a young woman named Kira. Her smile was sincere, not practiced. She greeted a traveler in a wheelchair with the same respect she gave a billionaire client. The verification device in her hand beeped softly, confirming membership in seconds. No questions, no suspicion. Nearby, Andrew supervised his new recruits. Their training had changed everything. Instead of intimidation drills, they practiced empathy. How to read tone, how to calm tension, how to protect with presence, not power. His once stern expression now carried pride, the kind that came from knowing you'd done something meaningful. Madeline passed through the terminal, holding a stack of completed customer apology letters. Each one had been written by hand. The training had humbled her, reshaped her understanding of what service meant. She paused when she saw Daniel and approached quietly. "Sir," she said softly, "the new system's working. We've gone 4 months without a single discrimination complaint, and the team's morale is higher than I've ever seen." Daniel nodded with a faint smile. "Good, keep it that way. Let respect become habit, not policy." He walked past her toward the lounge. Every detail was familiar. The polished glass walls, the muted hum of conversation. But the energy was new. At one table, a young black entrepreneur reviewed documents beside an elderly white investor. Across the room, a South Asian couple shared travel stories with a retired pilot. There was no discomfort, no hierarchy, only connection. A business channel played quietly on the lounge's main screen. The anchor's voice carried across the room. Skylux Aviation continues to lead an industry-wide shift in service ethics, with customer satisfaction up 30% and profits reaching record highs. Analysts are calling it proof that inclusivity drives growth. Daniel's reflection flickered across the glass. He didn't smile out of pride, he smiled out of relief. For years, he'd built planes, routes, and networks. Now, finally, he'd built something that could fly without wings, a legacy of fairness. His phone buzzed. A message from his stepdaughter lit the screen. "Dad, I got into Northwestern, pre-law. I want to help people build better systems like you did." For the first time in a long while, Daniel sat down. He let the quiet hum of conversation wash over him. Around him, people from different worlds shared the same space without fear or judgment. That was the real success, the moment when inclusion no longer felt like change, but like normal. Across the tarmac, the jets waited under the golden morning light. Their wings glistened like silver promises. Each one represented possibility, movement, progress. Daniel checked his watch. His flight was boarding soon, a trip to Geneva for the International Ethics Summit, where he'd announced Skylux's partnership with global travel associations to standardize fair service training across all luxury carriers. What had started as one confrontation would now influence every major airline on Earth. He stood, collected his briefcase, and began walking toward the boarding gate. As he passed, staff members nodded respectfully, not out of obligation but out of genuine regard. They knew who he was, but more importantly, they knew what he stood for. Just before stepping onto the jet bridge, Daniel paused and looked back one last time at the lounge, the very place where arrogance had once tried to humiliate him. Now it stood as proof that empathy could rebuild anything. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "This is how power should feel." When his jet lifted into the clouds, the sunlight streamed through the windows, washing everything in gold. The world below carried on, people boarding planes, sipping coffee, rushing through terminals. But somewhere within that ordinary rhythm, something extraordinary had taken root. Discrimination hadn't been defeated. It never could be, not completely. But now it had nowhere left to hide, because one man, calm and unyielding, had decided that dignity would no longer be a privilege. It would be the standard. And from that day forward, every passenger who walked into a Skylux lounge would feel the weight of that choice. Not in words, not in policies, but in the way they were treated, equal, respected, seen. That was the real victory. Not revenge, not punishment, transformation.